Hello and welcome to the weekly broadcast of Strategic Speaking for Results. I am Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and I'm so happy today to have as my guest the brilliant, amazing, wonderful Tulia Lopes. And so Tulia, welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results, Speakers Who Get Results, all of it.
Thank you so much. And I love the brilliant. I take it. I learned to say thank you.
Good. Oh, yes, that reminds me. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask you. So I'll just have to spring it on you. Just the official bio before we get started is that Tulia is a confident communication architect. And she's the author of the book Leading in High Heels, which is a step-by-step guidebook to help women boost their leadership skills. For more than a decade, she's been helping professional women build a solid foundation for their communication, presentation, and leadership skills. You can see why I like her. We check in on each other, say, okay, how are you doing it? How am I doing it? Her goal is to support women to eradicate the gender gap in leading positions and to bring women's voices to global stages. As the founder of the Speak Up and Lead Academy, she has a proven system which helps her clients become more confident and position themselves as experts in their fields. By expressing themselves with more clarity, they exude more authority, become more promotable, and more attractive for their markets. Tulia believes that communication is the key everyone needs to advance their careers and business. And she believes it is the most important weapon to fight bias and bring more diversity to all levels of the professional arena. So Tulia Lopes, welcome back to Strategic Speaking for Results.
Thank you very much for inviting me again, Elizabeth. It's always a pleasure to be here in this conversation.
Well, you were actually one of the first people I interviewed when I began this podcast 2 years ago, and I was on your show at that point. And so you're somebody that I follow. You've been doing a really interesting series about breaking the bias. But before we start on that, I want to ask you what I ask all my guests is, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
When you asked me this question, I was like, oh my God, who is this person? And then came to my mind just like that. And it was even a surprise to me, Coco Chanel.
Coco Chanel.
Yes. And then I thought, why Coco Chanel? Why did she come to my mind? And then with all this topic of breaking the bias and women breaking barriers, breaking through barriers, I remembered her that she was someone who broke through the barrier of the corset. So
the corset.
With her fashion, she allowed women to be free, even metaphorically free in the sense of feeling better, feeling good, because we all know those corsets were a nightmare for every woman, physically, and I assume mentally. But also she brought this new idea of dressing, of fashion, which was still very elegant and remains up today. And that liberated them. And for me also, then the curiosity came and I said, well, that's amazing. Let me research a little bit about her. What I would like to ask her. For me, it was like where this entrepreneurial idea came from, how she came with this like change of wearing. She was one of the first ones to wear trousers. And of course, she was super criticized about it and ostracized because of it. But she still, not only that she managed, she developed her brand. She was a true entrepreneur, like through and through. And up to today, who doesn't love Chanel style? So that would be my lady. And I'm saying, who would like to listen? I think everybody, not only women, but everybody, because the class, the style, and also, you know, she went through wars, not getting to the political side of it, but she went through wars and she managed to keep going with her vision, her idea, and liberating women through fashion. That's what she would be the one for me.
Yeah, you know, you were talking about corsets, and one of the things about having spent a lifetime in theater and a great deal of it dealing with period pieces where women were wearing corsets all the time, you know, there is the political side to corsets of always making a woman look more delicate than she really was, so that she would be acceptable, so that she would be would fit the fashion designs, which were mostly designed by men to make the women look like they wanted them to look, but also because corsets are a health challenge. They're in the late 19th century. I learned this from a costume historian once, that in the late 19th century in England, English women, upper class English women, were not having enough babies. And Irish immigrants were coming in, and the lower class women couldn't afford to wear a corset. So whenever they got pregnant, the babies came to term, as opposed to the women, the upper class women, who were wearing tight corsets, which caused miscarriages. And so there was a political movement to convince more good English women to have good English babies so that we wouldn't be overrun by these Irish immigrants. I mean, you hear these stories going on and on. The Romans were talking about how the upper class Roman women weren't having enough babies. And you know, this is a cycle that's been going on for centuries. But the part I remember was that the corset was deemed unhealthy. And that's where the bloomers came in. And there was a whole pre-Raphaelite movement where the women were not wearing corsets.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And also, if we take to the metaphorical part of it, and it's like, you know, society always trying to squeeze us in a form that not all of us fit in.
Right.
Because if you're slim, a corset is just another accessory. But if you're not, can you imagine? And the same as in the professional life, which we've been talking about this before, how many things I discovered by doing this challenge about the bias, which
let's talk about the challenge, because there may be some people who haven't heard this. You've just finished a 30-day challenge about bias, fighting bias with communication skills. Did I get the title right? Yeah.
Yes.
What got you started with this?
The thing is, I came across, well, you know, the beginning of the year and for the International Women's Day, the theme was break the bias, break the bias. And that called my attention because we hear about bias, but I didn't know much. We kind of, I believe we all know somehow what it is, but we don't really know what it is. And I can say that after going through this challenge. And because I wanted to, I'm doing my new program in a couple of weeks. I'm launching this new program, and it's about breaking through the barriers that we have, women have in the professional environment. And I thought, like, oh, this is a good thing to link to what I'm doing. Let me research. And then Leaning Organization, together with McKinsey Company, they have developed this research of over 6 years of Women in Corporate America about the 50 ways of bias and the 50 ways bias are affecting women in the workplace. And then they have this program of like giving examples of situations based on their research, why it matters, what can you do about it, and why it happens. And I thought, oh, this is a very good thing. I'm going to put myself in a challenge of 30 days. They have 50 ways I can absorb the 30 and use for my challenge. So I don't need to create content as such. I just need to get their content, study it, and then talk about it.
Yeah.
That was my main idea. I didn't know what I was going to go through.
So those of you who are watching and listening, I'm just going to say we're putting links to Tulia's ebook about breaking the barrier. Will be in the comments here. And I highly recommend going over and checking her out on LinkedIn and YouTube, which is where she has posted these 30 short videos all about bias. I've been following it. I don't manage every day, but boy, it is really interesting. It's really
like today was my 27th day. And I was even thinking, oh my God, 27th day. When I started, I said, okay, I do 30 days and I just posted there. And then afterwards, like, oh my God, what have I done to be live every day talking about something? But the more I did, the more I discovered, and the more I realized how unaware I was about biases and all the shapes and forms of bias happen that we are not really aware. And also how this is so important for people in leading positions to be aware of, because you are making decisions on how you hire people, how you manage people. And we have so many unconscious bias, and these are the danger ones because they're unconscious.
Yes.
And you are assuming you're taking your decision, you're making decisions based on fact, when in fact you are following those unconscious bias. These are
unconscious it's programming, really, that we get from society.
Because you have to think, Elizabeth, the way we behave as human beings. There was another thing that I've learned recently, like that our brain has mainly two functions. Our brain is there to solve problems, and to find the fastest way to solve problems and to save energy. So everything that is a change that requires us to change behavior means that our brain would have to learn that. And also this means spending more energy. So we immediately, subconsciously, we react against it. So this is why we react against change, because our inner nature is, let's save energy, because that's important for our survival, right?
Yes. Right.
So then those biases, what happens is in this study, going through this process, learning from this research, which is very interesting. They present lots of cases, which I believe are cases that happened throughout the research, because sometimes I think, no, this cannot be true. But, let's take in consideration that these are two well-known institutions, so they are serious. But then you realize that, yes, we prefer to ignore it because we don't want to deal with it, because this breaks our routine, this breaks our pattern.
You have to figure out something new
to take action.
Yes. Yeah. Let me ask you then, first of all, let's address the yes, but question that I'm sure is hanging there in some people's minds, which is there's all sorts of bias for men and women. Why are you focusing on women in this case?
I focus on the women because the women they are my target market.
They're the people that you work
them
to support women. Yes.
Yes, I support them. And it's not that I'm against men at all, guys, I love you. But, and I also, when I'm doing my trainings, my coaching, I don't like comparing much men and women, because I believe it's not about comparing, it's about us understanding our strengths and combining and joining forces. But sometimes you have to compare to understand what can we do to improve, because as the corset, we are told many things that are not real. We are made to believe many things that are not real. And in this next workshop I'm going to give on the 19th of May about breaking through the barriers, what I want to talk about is this: there are some barriers that are real. They are real. They are there. They're part of the culture, especially if you're in a corporate environment, about the male-dominated corporate environment. You cannot deny that. This is a reality. There are some that are not really real. It may be falls into our assumptions, our impressions, our perceptions, they're based on our reality and how the stories we were told to believe, that when we come to a certain environment, we start trying to identify those stories in that environment, but these many cases can be just our perception, not really what's happening in the environment. And then there are the ones that I believe are the more difficult, more challenging, and more worrying, which are the self-imposed barriers.
The internal barriers, yes.
Exactly. And these are, I believe, many women, they have just too many self-imposed barriers. And the worst is they put those barriers, they project those barriers towards other women. When they are the first one to judge, to criticize what they, quote unquote, don't approve as a woman behavior, especially mothers in the workplace.
Yes, well, it's when one hears one's mother's voice coming out of one's own mouth, and you say, wait, where did that come from? I was just channeling my grandmother. Sometimes for me, I had a very strong grandmother, and I hear their words coming out of my mouth and say, wait, do I particularly believe this? Certainly, we're not going to be able to get to everything in the time that we have. How can you list what are the top 3 biases that hold women back at work? And let's start with external because it's easier to see, and then talk about where that affects the internal biases as well. The ones that we put up for ourselves.
Okay, in this study, they mentioned 6 biases. I can mention them all, and then I tell you the 3 ones. The first is unconscious, then performance, attribution, affinity, likability, and the last one, I don't remember right now, but
motherhood.
Back to me. But for women directly is performance
bias,
and maternal. Yes, that
maternal
was the last
bias.
one.
Yes.
Performance, maternal, and I would say like affinity and likability are quite very, very close. So these would be, because if you're a man, if you are a man, or if you're a white man, then you have already a woman. So the likability is in question there because you're 2 different genders to get started.
Yeah.
Right. So these would be the 3 ones.
It's a lot of the work that I do around helping single-focused and multi-focused people speak to each other. If you think of it as 2 different languages, instead of assuming that you'll be understood. Talk a little bit more about affinity bias and how that gets in the way. Affinity, likability. Affinity is finding someone like yourself.
Yes,
and likability is part of that.
As they say, we gravitate toward people like ourselves in appearance, beliefs, and background. Because in our primitive brain, it says like, we are safe around these people.
Yes.
And we might avoid and even dislike people who are different of us without any reason. It's just because of the fact they are different. And we start because, as I said before, it will require time for us, energy, to learn about these people, to understand the world from their perspective, why they see things in a certain way. So instead of going that, because that means we will have to spend energy, we just ignore it, and then we say, I don't like this. Okay. I don't like these people, without even questioning why you don't.
So that's similar to one of the things that I've heard about for years is when a woman is up for promotion and the men will say, I don't know, she just doesn't seem to have executive presence. And I always think that executive presence, quote unquote, is code for I don't want to hire her. I don't like her, but I don't know why. So I'll just say it's executive presence.
There's a lot of things, because this is why my focus when I started doing this challenge is that, like, how to use effective communication to fight bias at work and beyond. Because as you said, you read in my profile, like in my bio, that I do believe the communication is everything. It's the foundation for everything. I would say we would have much better lives, much better relationships, much better work environments, family environments, friends environments, if we knew how to express ourselves effectively, meaning with clarity, with the openness of listening the others. And why I'm saying that, because what in the example you gave there, and saying, oh, I think, I feel, I don't know, these are all subjective language that doesn't give any fact to you. So the big flag for managers, leaders, people in a higher position here is, when you think, you feel, you believe, you have to watch your language, because you should provide the facts. You should provide, you could say, I would say that she doesn't have the executive presence because, then you're talking subjectively. Then you can, objectively.
Objectively,
then you can give the reason why you have this perception. But people go with the I think, I feel. And my saying here to your audience out there, take this as a lesson that I've learned, is like the assumptions are the mothers of all fuck ups. Don't assume anything.
Of all fuck ups. Okay. Yes.
Exactly. Just, you have to get facts. And that is a common thing that happens in the working environment. People in a higher position, likability. I don't know you. You come from a culture that I don't understand. Would that be a good cultural fit?
Yeah.
So this is a secondary aspect. Okay, this can be something to be considered in the future for the culture of the company. But if you are hiring someone, if you're promoting someone, this is not the aspect. You have to look the records, the performance,
what are the facts? Yes.
the experience, and people go through their gut feeling, gut feeling, because it's based on their own experience. I believe the gut feeling is important. However, when I have two candidates that are exactly the same, then I would say I need to find something here that differentiate those two, because they have the same records and performance and everything. So I have to decide. And then on that, you can even ask other people to help you out. Yes. But many people go through gut feelings and perceptions, and this is not objective approach.
So would it be fair to say that the first step is awareness, being aware? And the second step is being clear about it. One of the things that I've been thinking about when I've been listening to your excellent, interesting recordings is how women, here's an internal barrier, women tend not to ask directly, not to ask for a promotion. They will drop a hint. It's one of the ways that women are taught mostly by other women, by mothers and grandmothers and aunts and such, are taught to not be direct, because you might insult somebody if you ask directly. And if you don't, you have to really think about how to do it, how to be clear. And I had a client who wanted a promotion, and she hinted about it. Her manager didn't understand that she was actually asking for the promotion. So the manager paid no attention. And then she thought the manager hated her and was ready to quit. mostly because she had not specifically asked. And the manager was focused on something else, and he didn't realize that this was an actual question. So that's one of the things, the hints that women are taught not to ask directly. So I have to now come back to you about the internal barriers that women put up. How can we learn to be direct, as you said, to be clear? You were talking about it. Once we have recognized that there's a bias.
And I love that you put this, because that is a very intriguing equation. Because the fact is, when you're not assertive, when you're not direct in your work environment and you want to progress, people will tell you, you need to be more assertive. You need to speak up. And then when you speak up, you become more assertive. They would say, oh, she's too much. She's too ambitious.
Too bossy, yes.
She's too abrasive. This was another terminology that I learned during this challenge. Abrasive.
Yes.
So there's no winning there. And the good thing about this is, again, the lesson that we all have to learn. You could never please everybody. You can never. So what you have to do is,
that
what
again,
is your
please.
goal?
Say that again. We need to hear that again.
There's a second, in case you didn't hear, you will never, ever please everybody. The first one to be pleased is yourself. So you need to know where you want to go. And you need to know, okay, what do I need to prepare to get what I want to get? People are going to talk about you. And the interesting thing also, Elizabeth, because we are both entrepreneurs, why we have this connection, why you call me here, why do I call you in my interviews as well, because we support each other, because we believe in what we are doing. So therefore, I believe in you as well. And I also believe that the people who are doing, they will never really criticize you randomly. They might be not in favor of what you're doing. They might see it differently, but they would come to you and say, I would say, Elizabeth, yeah, fine, you're doing this, but I see it differently. I will never put you down, say, what are you, crazy? What are you doing? Yes. All these people that communicate at that level, if you look their records, they are not doing. They are there frustrated in whatever they are doing. So of course they want to stop everybody else off pursuing something bigger. So for the ladies out there, and not only the ladies, everybody out there, when you believe you can achieve more and you want to achieve more, look for the people who are doing. Yes. And talk to them, get their guidance, because these people will not criticize you. They might say to you and say, while your idea is not really effective, the way you're thinking is not going to help you to get what you want. And they will help you with new ideas. Don't listen to these people who are saying, oh, what are you thinking? So this is another thing. And that is the problem with men and women out there, because they listen too much to all these other people who try to put them down, and they believe and they start self-doubting. We all have our self-doubts. That's normal, especially when we are doing something, a next step that is out of our famous not comfort zone. Yes. We will be insecure, we will be uncertain, but we need to start building our foundations of the first thing is to analyze, where am I right now? Where do I want to go? What do I have to get there? And what I'm still missing? And if I'm missing, who is going to help me to get those skills, that experience, the contact, whatever it is.
There's a great phrase that I heard of a woman who wanted a promotion, and she made an appointment with her manager so that she had his full attention. And then she said, here's this promotion. I think I'm the right person for it. And then she said, what do you need from me to make that happen? And that put it right out on the table so that the manager could say, it was a woman who wanted to do this, wanted the promotion, and the manager was a man. And the manager said, first of all, thank you for being so clear. And secondly, you're good here, here, and here. These two areas, I'd like to see you do more. Maybe you're doing it and I don't notice it.
Mhm.
So be a bit more visible in these two other areas, and then we'll make it happen. So I've never forgotten that what
That
do you
it was
need? Yeah,
brilliant.
very clear. What do you need from me to make that happen? And that had it going. While we're talking, I want to get to specifically, if you feel like someone, we're talking about microaggressions. If you feel like someone is biased against you, who's not taking you seriously, shall we say, what can you do? How can you address that?
Well, it's very difficult in to want to stand for ourselves when you feel attacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing is, I believe, is Stephen Covey says, the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that your greatest power relies between a stimulus and response. So because it's your power of choice. Every time there's a stimulus towards you, meaning there's an action or there's an attack, right? Our first action is a reaction. Yeah, let's say our first action is a reaction, like a not thoughtful reaction.
Right.
We react unconsciously. We as defense mode is like, you attack me, I attack you. You attack me more, I attack you more. So that is the very primitive way of reaction. So the power relies on you allowing yourself to give yourself this space between the stimulus and the response, and decide what kind of response you are going to have, because that is the power. And one thing that we need to learn and understand, not only women out there, we don't need to answer any question immediately. And in fact, we don't need to answer any question at all if we don't want to. But we have the feeling that, especially women, because we are told to be nice and be polite when people ask you something, you have to answer. We don't give ourselves the time to elaborate. And I always quote Obama on this because everybody knows him. And also you can see how Obama speaks. Obama says something and he drops it there. And then he takes his time and he moves to the other side and says something else. And it's the same when he is interviewed. The people ask him a question, he gives this few seconds of silence. And what happens there? Instead of appearing that he is someone insecure, it's the other way around. It appears that he is so secure of himself that he takes the time to elaborate what he has to say. So back to your question, for a woman who sees or a person who feels attacked, understand, try to listen again, like internalize what was said, and understand what could be the reason of that comment, of that remark. And then you ask directly, why are you saying this? Did I give you any reason for you to think that way? Because the fact is, Elizabeth, because most of people, and I include myself because I am working on that, but I do not consider myself the best on it. We are not good listeners. None of us. We are all ready to speak, to say something, and the listening, so like we're talking with you here, I'm holding myself not to say something, right? Because we are prepared to answer immediately, especially women, without thinking. The key is to become good listeners and start asking questions. When people throw something on you, absorb it, and then ask to confirm that you understood that correctly. And don't assume, because everybody goes assuming things. And as you gave the first example, this person, your client that came, she dropped a hint about her promotion. What the hell is this? How could I guess your hint?
Yes.
And then because the other person didn't react in the way she expected, you see, all subjective.
All subjective.
And then assumed that the person didn't like her. So all these stories, none of it based on facts and real facts. So back to your question is ask, because when you rephrase, but ask using the same wording that the other person used, because when you rephrase what someone said, you also give the person to the opportunity to rethink what they said, because as everybody just speaks without thinking, they might just throw something on you. And then when you force them in a way saying, Elizabeth, did I understand well that you mentioned this? Why? I'm putting you against the wall in a very diplomatic, polite, and respectful way, asking you to explain yourself to me. And that process that happens in minutes, seconds, forces you to, if you want to continue with that, you know, in the back of your mind, there'll be consequences. So you have to make your stand. Or otherwise, and what happens most of the case, people say, oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant.
Yeah. And of course, if you're going to talk to somebody about how they were not being polite, do it in private. Don't do it in front of everybody else.
No, and I don't think you should say you're not polite, because this sounds also as a counterattack. I think if you ask and you say something to me and I said, did I understand correctly that you said X, Y, Z, and you repeat? So I'm not saying that you're impolite, knowing that you are, knowing that you're trying to attack me, maybe in a subtle way, but I'm not reacting.
Yes.
As I said, I cannot change facts, but I can change how I react. I cannot change the questions and the attacks, but I can change how I react to that. So that would be my advice to your community out there.
Okay. Tulia, this is fascinating. And there's so much more. We could go on for hours, but I don't have hours. I have to let this go. If there's one thing we could start with, what would be the first one tip that you could leave us with today?
The first tip I would like women to start understanding is that I would suggest people really go through reading those, what bias is about. And this is why I'm giving you this PDF, which is a compilation of what I have done so far. I do really suggest you to do that, because that was an eye-opener for me. And there is some very specific data there for you to understand that. And from there, you can start looking yourself first. Everything starts from oneself, and see if when you have a kind of a reaction towards a situation, if that is what is really happening, or if this is your own biases, your own conversations. So, but this, you need to understand the types of bias and how they work and how we can fall into them very, very easily, because bias is not only related to gender, culture, race. These are the easy ones. The unconscious bias, there are so many. And maternal bias, ladies out there, be kind to each other. I think women are the most inflicting towards each other. You know, it's like we're too ready to judge, especially mothers. I don't have children. I don't think you have. Do you have?
I do not have children.
You don't.
But I am an aunt.
But I'm very aware, and there's not such a thing, one size fits all, and each woman understand motherhood and responsibilities over family work in a different way. And the thing is, I think you can express your way of seeing, provided it is respectful, but don't judge. And this will be for me, first, before judging the world out there, you have to get to do some homework and learn about how you behave towards our world out there.
Well, Tulia, it is an ongoing conversation. I think I have to have you back in a couple of months to talk about more about this so that we can get to some of the rest of this. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been the weekly broadcast of Strategic Speaking for Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. My guest has been Tulia Lopes. I'll see you on the next one.